Let's turn to another United Nations failure. Mali, a country in West Africa, one of the many that experienced a coup in the past few years. Mali actually saw two of them, two coups, one in 2020 and the second one in 2021. Their military junta has been in charge ever since. And from day one, they've had one mission: to remove the United Nations peacekeeping forces posted in Mali. These forces have been there since 2013. What for? To combat terrorist insurgencies. But yesterday, the last of the UN troops began packing up. So what will Mali do now? Will the junta fight terrorists on its own? Not really. They've been working with another defense partner for years, one that has proven to be arguably more effective. We are talking about Russia's controversial mercenary group, Wagner. Our next report brings you the details.
That was the ceremonial lowering of the United Nations flag. It took place in Mali yesterday, in the capital, Bamako. The country is still part of the UN, but it will be letting go of a UN institution, MINUSMA, that stands for the United Nations Multidimensional Integrated Stabilization Mission in Mali. It's basically a UN peacekeeping force, one of the many that dot Africa. MINUSMA has been in Mali for over 10 years, but it was dissolved on the 30th of June this year. Its troops will leave Mali completely at the end of this month.
In just over 2 weeks' time, MINUSMA will close its doors for good, a process that began shortly after the adoption of Resolution 2690, which followed the Malian authorities' request for the mission to be withdrawn.
That was the head of the MINUSMA mission. At one time, MINUSMA was the third largest UN peacekeeping force in the world. It fielded over 12,000 troops. Now, about 2/3 of them have left for their home countries. 10 out of 13 bases have been handed over to Mali. The remaining troops will leave by December 31st. The remaining bases will be returned by the turn of the year.
We leave with the conviction that we have done everything in our power to carry out the mandate given to the mission, proud of what we have been able to achieve, but also clear-sighted about the limits of our action.
MINUSMA was formed in April 2013. Their mission was to protect Mali from rebel and terrorist insurgencies. Northern Mali had plunged into chaos. Ethnic Tuareg rebels had captured great swathes, including cities like Gao, Timbuktu and Kidal. This instability allowed extremist groups to enter the region, beginning the terrorist insurgencies in West Africa. Groups affiliated with the Islamic State and Al-Qaeda gained ground in the region. MINUSMA tried to protect civilians from the insurgents, but they never succeeded in ridding the area of the terror groups. That's why Mali wanted MINUSMA out. The ruling military junta had had enough. In 2020 and then again in 2021, Mali saw military coups. The generals took charge, saying they needed to be in power to effectively fight the insurgents. They criticized MINUSMA and Western troops led by France. The junta called them ineffective. This June, they dissolved MINUSMA. Mali's rulers also made gains against the rebels, without MINUSMA's help. But the junta hasn't been working alone. They've had help from the infamous Wagner mercenary group. The Wagner group is based in Russia. You may remember them as the force that marched towards Moscow earlier this year. The mercenary force founded by Yevgeny Prigozhin, who died in a plane crash in August.
Пиздец, это беспилотник. Вон.
Wagner has been active in Africa for years, providing a steelier alternative to UN forces. And Wagner seems to be bringing victory to Mali's forces. Mali seized the town of Kidal from rebel forces on the 14th of November. The country celebrated it as a victory for the junta, but they weren't the only ones celebrating. Reports say a week after the capture, a Wagner flag was hoisted in Kidal. It was proof of the force's effectiveness and a way to justify the reportedly lavish pay the group receives. The group earns money in the form of training Mali's soldiers. That's the official story anyway. Wagner also protects resources and assets like gold mines, oil fields and lumberyards, for a cut of course. The group makes millions due to its operations. But Wagner's success is also due to something else: its brutality. Unlike the UN peacekeepers, Wagner troops have no problem using overwhelming force.
What Wagner and the Mali government are doing is primarily intended to terrorize the population.
The presence of the Malian army and the Wagner in the Kidal region is creating panic among the civilian population of Kidal. Because when the Malian army and the Wagner pass through a region, people only see abuses of peaceful populations.
Success through brutal force. It's bringing them victories, but at what cost? Mali's rulers seem to think the end justifies the means, and they are done with waiting for the UN peacekeepers to bring them peace.